What's up, everyone? Welcome to the MIDCONVO podcast. We have a freaking special episode today. I have here with me Matthew Encina. We're actually in his LA studio. If you're watching on video, you have to because this podcast setup is fire. I'm not gonna lie. We just spent the last 2 hours setting this up. So if you do me a favor, if you're listening and driving, that's fine. Don't want you to crash and watch a video. But if you get a chance, go on YouTube, watch the video version. You won't regret it. So Matthew Encina, he is a content creator, product designer, educator, and creative director. There's so much under Matthew's belt in terms of experience. I'm super happy to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. And it's funny. It's funny always hearing back your title and how people introduce you, because when I first started as a creative, as a designer, we would always make fun of the slashies. You know, people who would have 10 different slashes in their name. And here I am now fully embracing that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a multifaceted creative. Give me all the slashes.
It's so funny because if you go back on our podcast, we had Puno. Puno is also a creative director, creative, and she talked about that as well, like the slashes. And there's so many titles we have now. But overall, you're just a creative genius, in my opinion. Really meticulous, an awesome product developer. So I'm really excited to have this podcast episode. A quick little notes, guys. Paul, as you know, my co-host. We miss you, Paul. He's not here, obviously, for this episode because for those of you who don't already know, he's in Miami and I'm literally in LA. And Paul is about to have a child. So he couldn't make the trip out and join us in the studio, but he's going to be excited to listen to this as much as you guys are on this recording. But we're going to get into it. A little bit of a different vibe today. So Matthew, he does a lot, but he's really into mechanical keyboards. And he has new products coming out actually around that, which we'll get into a little bit later in the conversation. But he had a great idea. And for those of you listening, I'll explain it. For you watching, you already know there's some boxes in front of me. But we're doing this podcast episode today like kind of like a Hot Ones almost, where we're doing something while having a conversation. And we're going to be building a mechanical keyboard from scratch. And Matthew's going to show me, because I'm so green with this. We're going to build a keyboard that he's launching, and it's going to be fun.
It's your first keyboard build ever?
First ever. Like, I've always wanted a mechanical keyboard, like a nice one, but there's just so much to it. And there's so many small parts. There's so many different variations. I think the variations is what gets me overwhelmed. Yes. So I'm actually really excited today to also learn about like the different key types. Guys, there's such a thing as a bougie keyboard. If you didn't already know, and you're not in that world, let me tell you, there is such a thing as a bougie keyboard, and we will go into it today, okay? You might feel insecure about your keyboard after this episode. I'm sorry, but
no judgment here.
No judgment. But it's gonna be a fun one, and obviously we're gonna have a conversation while we're doing it. So let's just maybe start first, real quick, before we unbox this stuff. Or maybe I could do it as I'm unboxing.
Feel free to ask.
I'm going to start to unbox this stuff.
Yes.
And then in the meantime, I think I'd love to know a little bit about your history as a content creator, creative director. A lot of people who listen to the podcast are freelancers, creative entrepreneurs. People are really trying to embrace being a creative and what that means in this modern day. For you, can you give us a little background of, have you always held a camera? Have you started in something else? What is your background in a professional sense?
Sure. And, as you get started on this is the keyboard in here. These are the accessories that we're going to use to build the keyboard. In the final version, because this is a kind of slightly pre-production version, all of these accessories are going to be in this box. And then these are keycaps, which we won't need until the end. So you can do that. I will kind of give my brief history of me as a creative. So I've been a creative professional now for just over 20 years. I first started as a graphic designer, which is what I went to school for at Art Center. And I started in editorial design. So I worked at a punk magazine, designing layouts for that, and that was really fun. And eventually I found my way into motion design, which is basic. If you don't know what that is, it's like graphic design in motion. So same design principles, but it's moving. And that kind of combined my childhood dream as wanting to be an animator when I was really young with my new principles of design, things that I've learned and appreciated about typography, grids, and communicating visually. And so for the next sprint, probably next decade, I got into the advertising world. So I spent about a decade in advertising, in motion design as a creative director, first as a freelancer and then as a creative director. And I directed a bunch of commercials for clients like Microsoft, Xbox, PlayStation, pretty much a lot of the Fortune 500 companies. And advertising, it's its own world when TV was still very, very relevant. It's less so today, and it's very different now. But that was the era that I kind of grew up in, where I kind of learned about what it is to be a professional creative, pitching to clients, learning how to work with budgets, learning how to direct a team, learning how to translate something, a goal of a client, into something that's actionable for my team, and then into something that's usable and relevant and useful for the client and whatever their needs are. So that was a great period of my life where I got to learn a lot of tools, got to meet a lot of people, developed a lot of skills. And I did that for a long time, and that kind of gave me a really good base to just get a sense of, again, what it's like to be a creative professional. And then eventually, around 2016, my old boss, Chris Doe, who he was my boss at Blind, and then he also started the second company called The Futur, which is a creative education company. Their primary focus is making content about the creative process, about the business of creativity, and how to level up there. Around 2016, he's like, hey, I want you to come onto the channel. I want you to teach something. And at that time, I was kind of asking myself, why? Why me? Like, what do I have to teach? Like, people are going to the channel for you. You're the main personality. You're the one who taught me. I have nothing to teach other people. And it was at that point where he said, no. You have plenty to teach. You're just taking all the things that you do for granted. He was saying all the things that you do every single day when it comes to directing the team or working on these projects, all of that is special. It took you years to develop those skills to get where you're at today. And you just have to reflect on that and kind of unpack that for other people. And so he convinced me, and I said, okay, I'll turn the camera around and then I'll be the person in front of the camera. And that got me started on making my first video at The Futur, which turned into dozens of videos after that. Then I ended up moving full swing at The Futur. So we stopped doing the agency work over at Blind. So we stopped all the advertising stuff, and then we moved into just content full-time, education full-time. And that's what kind of got me into content creation. Eventually I started my own channel, sharing more personal things as me as a designer, as me as a creative. And now we're here. Now I'm just doing that full-time, whatever all that is, and all the slashies in between.
Yeah. No, there's a lot to unpack there. I think it's fascinating that you're into holding a camera now, like you're so good at it, but there's actually so much more to your creative experience. And I think it's valuable that you had so much training in the just not camera related creative things,
right?
Like pitching, putting together a proper proposal, these small things that maybe don't get talked about enough, but are so crucial to the success of being a freelancer, to the success of being a content creator. For those who, if you guys already missed it, I'm not sure if you heard it, but if you're familiar with who Chris Doe is, he does a lot of content online. You've probably come across either a TikTok, a YouTube video, or an Instagram reel from Chris, because he makes awesome content. But Matthew was, I would say, like, Chris is probably right-hand guy for a long time. So that's actually one of the ways that I started learning more about Matthew was through The Futur, where he was working before. And then obviously full circle for me, like when I was making my home office videos, I came across a ton of Matthew's YouTube videos. I was like, dude, who is this guy? He's like, it's such a big inspiration. So this is actually a very cool thing for me as well to sit here. It's like a full circle moment to be able to have this conversation. So, but I'm gonna unbox this keyboard that just opened. So you're saying this is just the keyboard, right?
Right. So this is the Mode Encore. This is a keyboard that I designed and is produced by Mode. So as I said earlier, that little foam pack that you just took out, that's where the accessories box is going to sit. So that external accessories box is going to sit on top of here. Okay. So yeah, this is the keyboard.
Unboxing experience, guys. ASMR. Okay.
Yeah, so this is a keyboard that I started designing about a year ago, and it's finally coming to fruition.
Ooh, it's weighty. Like it feels, wow. Like it feels really premium. Way nicer than my keyboard at home for sure. Wow, so can you tell me a little bit real quick about like the extrusion or like the molding? Like is this just like is this like super custom? Is this like a new design or? Like
yes.
What went into making like the molding, I guess, and the textures for it?
Yeah, so this keyboard I designed from scratch. It's something that I had never done before because while I know visual design and have some experience in visual 3D, I have no experience in industrial design and CAD modeling. So that's something that I had to learn specifically for this project.
Oh, wow.
So this keyboard it's all machined. So the way it goes through in terms of manufacturing, it starts as a chunk of raw aluminum or whatever the raw material is. So this is a 2-part design. It's wood, like American hardwood, and then there's a piece of metal. It starts as a block of metal. It goes through an extrusion to get that profile, that general shape. And then it goes into a CNC machine where all the grooves, the details, everything is cut out by this machine with different bits. And then from there, it gets bead blasted. And then the wood goes through a similar process, same thing. It starts as a chunk of wood, gets cut down and trimmed with the CNC. And then these two are joined together, the wood and the the aluminum top right here. And then they're hand sanded together so that the edges are nice and flush. So the wood is combined onto the alu at like maybe 5 or 6 different points here with inserts and fasteners. And then they're hand sanded together. Then separately, they are finished. So the wood is finished with Osmo Poly oil, which I've used on a lot of my kind of like home projects for my furniture that I've built. And then the aluminum parts, they get either anodized with whatever color it needs, or it gets e-coated for the white version of this. So the one you're holding now is the all black aluminum with walnut.
I love that it's also sanded with the like the transition from like the wood to the metal is like seamless. Like it doesn't even look like it was inserted or screwed, right? Like it looks like it's part of the metal, which is very interesting.
And that was a big challenge for the design too, because when you're trying to line up two different materials, especially an organic material and something that's metal plays nice when you're CNCing it, but wood is organic, so it breathes. Right? So depending on the climate, whatever, you have to figure out how to fasten these things and then how to line them up. And for us, figuring out how to make this as seamless as possible, that was one of the challenges for this project.
All right. So what's the first step to getting this built?
So the first step, what we want to do to build the internals here. So this is the back side, this is the front side. What we're going to do is we're going to install our stabilizers. So stabilizers are these long wires that help balance your longer keys. So like your space bar, enter, backspace, and then your shift.
Whoa. Okay. Fascinating. All right. How do we start that?
Okay. So these are your stabilizers right here. If you want to open that up.
We're going to unbox y'all.
So the stabilizers are made of multiple parts. First, there's the wires. And then there are these parts right here, the housings for it. And so these are just made of plastic. What you end up doing is you clip them into the PCB, you screw them in to tighten that, and you use the wires there. That's the thing that helps both sides stay aligned.
Oh, I see.
Right. So when you're pressing a space bar,
down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So the first thing you need to do is actually prepare these by lubing them. So you would use a lubricant and a brush. So the way you would do this is right here, I'm using a 205G0 lubricant. Then I have a brush. And the way you do this, I already have lubricant on these, but you just take a very small amount and then you would be applying them
Oh, wow.
at any points of friction. So this is where you apply it on the wires, which are going to sit inside the housing, and the housing. And we could leave resources. I have a whole page dedicated to just like how to build your first mechanical keyboard.
Yeah.
So we can link that. But in this one, then you would just brush on the inside on the housings in here. So anywhere where this slider is going to have friction, because you want it to be smooth and you don't want to hear the stabilizer when you're operating this. And then when you're all done with this, you're just going to clip in the stabilizer into the housing here. Yeah, this is for the space bar. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that, and you see these big holes here on the PCB. The clips are going to sit in there. And so you want to sit that there, that one and that one. So the keyboard will come with a screwdriver, a switch puller, keycap puller, and then also all the fasteners that you need. So
this is nice. This little screwdriver is nice. It's so funny when you unbox packages. I like the little touches.
Yeah.
Like, you know, in little hardware, they send you a screwdriver. Like, I've kept nice screwdriver from when I built furniture.
Yeah.
Or just like anything really.
Whenever you're screwing anything in, it's always good to align the threading first before you screw it in. So the way you align the threading is you go backwards until you hear it click. This is across the board for all threading. So if you screw backwards counterclockwise, you'll hear it go click. That means that the threading and the screw is aligned, and then you screw forward. So if you've ever had the problem of stripping threading, because I've done that so many times in my life, this is the way to avoid that altogether.
Okay.
So yeah, now it's seated flat there. And then we're going to do that for the other one. So if you want, I could do the other ones if you want to ask me a question.
Perfect.
At this stage.
Yes.
And I'm happy to move forward with this because I can walk and talk on this.
All right. Sounds good. A lot of creatives struggle with finding their path in the creative industry. Oftentimes it starts with having an interest in design or photography or videography or filmmaking. But it's very difficult sometimes to translate that into an actual career path. What, I guess, tips or advice would you have with your own experience in mind of how you actually went through those like decade of each career transition, like each skill set building block? Was it very natural or was it very calculative?
I'm not a person who has grand plans for anything. I'm just a person who follows my gut and instincts and will lean into whatever I'm very curious about at that moment. And so I could barely tell you what I'm going to do next week. I'm not a person who's like, I have a 5-year plan. So I approach my creative career the same way. If there's something that interests me, I lean in, and I lean in hard, because it's like if something catches my eye, usually my curiosity takes over and I cannot stop until I know everything about it. You know, and usually that's a good indicator for me to be like, okay, I'm going to invest my time in this. And I pursue it with that. Usually just with, like, for instance, like mechanical keyboards, I had no interest to design my own keyboard. That was not my goal. My goal was not to monetize it. My goal was just like, I'm passionate about this thing. It's interesting. It's creative. And eventually I found my way to it because of how things overlapped in my life. But with early on in my career, I was just leaning into my curiosity. So when I was a freelancer and I'm bouncing around at different studios or working next to people, I see the freelancer next to me who's a specialist at something else. For instance, like they do 3D simulations. I have no knowledge of that. What do I do? It's like, hey, what are you working on? How did you do that? And that's where I started learning through osmosis and through the generosity of other people, where they're so willing to teach you. Because, you know, if you ask somebody what they're doing or asking how they did that, most people will feel happy and obliged to want to share with you. They feel like, oh my gosh, you're taking so much interest in the work that I do that I'm so happy to share. Most people, they aren't curious enough to ask other people like, wow, how'd you do that? Right? It's different nowadays, I think. Too many people ask stuff on social media without building any rapport.
Got it.
Right? That's different. This setting is like, okay, we're both working on this job together. We're both specialized in different things, but I can lean in and ask you because we're both in the trenches together. And so that helped me learn really fast about other things. And it's like, okay, I'm curious about that. And I've learned enough of that. I know how it works, but I don't want to pursue that. Like, oh, that's too technical for me, or that can't hold my interest long term. Where other things is like, for instance, like creative direction, watching other people having to go back and forth, talking to clients, dealing with budgets, and learning how to communicate. That was something that was a huge gap for me as a designer early on. It's not something I would do because I was not client facing.
Oh yeah, true.
Right. But then that was something that luckily I had opportunities that helped me learn those things and helped me kind of get to develop those skills, because that was something that I wanted to develop long term. So I'm going to pause there and you can ask me a follow-up question, because I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, definitely. That's a good segue into another question I had, was about mentorship. I think a lot of times many creatives are looking for some sort of guidance, right? And naturally so, because there's so many courses and gurus and so many so much educational content now on social media and online in general. I know for yourself, a mentor of yours was Chris Do, and when you were at Blind and at Futur, what advice would you have for someone listening that has always wanted some sort of guidance, some sort of mentorship, but just obviously don't have the funds necessarily to be dishing out on like a elite $10,000 mastermind? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where do you start? Like, how do you find that help, that blueprint, that guidance to maybe find your first mentor, or maybe find your first step in the direction that you would like to transition your career into?
Yeah, I would say the easiest thing to do is just to make friends. I think most people think about it's hard, because with Chris, the reason he was my mentor is because he was my teacher at Art Center in 2006.
Oh, because he was your professor.
He was my professor, yeah. So
you were one of his students, literally.
I literally was one of his students when he was teaching, because he was teaching a long time before he jumped online, right? He was running his business a long time before he jumped online. He's just doing it now for everybody. And so for me, I think I had a unique case where I just always put myself in the right environment whenever I felt something got stagnant. So then I think that's also reflective of my creative career too. It's like whenever I felt like a slump, I knew I was like, I'm going to change everything. I got to change my environment. I got to do something completely different. And when I put myself into that type of environment, then it changes the things, the stimulus, the inputs, like everything around me changes. And then that usually stimulates new growth, right? So if you're looking for mentorship, again, going back into custom mechanical keyboards, I knew nothing before this, but because of the generosity of the community of friends that I developed in the space, just again, being genuinely curious and interested in other people's projects, things that they've designed, and just asking very genuinely about their process, people just feel like they want to share. And so all of this stuff, all of my mentors nowadays, especially in the keyboard space, they're all digital friends. Most of them I have not met in real life, but I just know through Instagram DMs. And it's just because we're able to share information with each other. I think that's also a nice thing too, is if you develop yourself and have some skills and something valuable, you also have something to exchange with another person, right? Because it's not just a one-way thing where you're like, hey, tell me how you did that. Hey, tell me how you did that. At a certain point, somebody's going to ask you like, hey, how did you do that? Or you can also ask, how can I be helpful? Like, I'd love to learn from you. Like, is there anything I can do to help you? Or I see this all the time too. A lot of the people that I've mentored myself are people who have made themselves helpful to me. I'll give you an example. When I was working at the Futur, I went to a meetup in Houston, right? Like me and Ben Burns, my coworker at the Futur, we flew out there for a client job. And we were also doing the Futur, and we're like, hey, impromptu meetup. We'll go meet up at this bar, and then whoever is local, if you want to meet up. So we had a little fun get together, and then there was somebody who's just capturing footage the whole time. And then later that night, they had like a 90-second reel of the event. And I was like, who is this person? How cool is that? Because obviously it's nice to have stuff documented that you could share with other people, but he just did this unprompted. Save that. Later, a few months later, maybe 6 months later, we put up a post. We're like, hey, we're looking for interns, videographers, and editors. He applied. I was like, I remember you. He flew out from Houston. He moved to LA, and then we ended up hiring him full time, and we worked with him for a couple of years.
Wow.
He moved on, but then I also hired him as a freelancer because I trained him. I worked with him.
Yeah.
And he's just somebody who has always tried to make themselves helpful to other people and give value in return, because he knows he's learning through osmosis, through other people, and being in certain environments around certain people.
That's really good. I love that, because I think mentorship, oftentimes when you don't have a mentor, you think it's something that you find like someone who's amazing, they bring you under their wing, and then somehow you become super successful after that. It's like, I don't think it actually looks like that. I agree in that. I think mentorship sometimes can be from like your own colleagues. It can be from a community that you've never met. I think people are looking for mentorship kind of in the wrong way.
Right.
I think they kind of need to look for mentorship in a way that you just need to be more noticing what's around you and not looking for that silver, bullet, basically, for help.
Yeah, there's a great concept that I think encompasses all of this. I'm paraphrasing, and I believe this is from the MMA fighter Ken Shamrock. He had this concept of plus minus equal. So when you're training in the gym, it's always good to have a plus minus equal. A minus is somebody who is a few years behind you, somebody that you train up so that you can kind of help them whenever, you're their mentor. You get to help them kind of avoid the landmines and pitfalls that you went through and help them through the issues that you've already seen and you've already been through. It's good to have an equal, somebody who's your peer, who's kind of at the same level to push you. Because like, oh, okay, they get better. They're learning this new technique or this new fighting combo. It pushes you to train a little bit harder, right? And having those two, it's like, oh, great. Like we get to keep pushing each other. And then whenever you feel like you've gotten ahead, it's like, yeah, I'm the best. You have your plus. You have the person who's senior to you, or like, oh, they will just tell you, like, you haven't been through it yet. This is a moment, a chapter in your life, but you're not there yet. You wait. You wait, right? So I love that concept, and to me, that's how I see mentorship a little bit differently, where it's a stream, right? It's not just like, hey, give me. It's like you have to give back, and you also have to have just this flow of different people around you to contribute, because when you contribute, then you also get something in return.
Yeah, plus minus equal. I like that concept a lot. That's amazing. Oh, are we moving to the next step?
Yes.
Of the keyboard?
So we're done here with the keyboard. We have our stabilizers installed here. And so the next part is we're going to be installing our plate. Okay. So there's two different plates here. There's going to be several different materials. This one, I believe, is aluminum.
Carbon fiber?
Oh, this is carbon fiber. Yeah. Carbon fiber, that's currently my favorite, right? So this is one of the stiffer materials, but it's lightweight. And then that one is polypropylene, I believe.
Oh yeah, this is like more like plastic.
Yeah. So each plate, the function of the plate is to hold the switches in place.
Oh, I see.
So this is going to sit on top of the PCB.
Oh.
Okay. And then we're going to push our switches in there. But you'll find out that each individual component changes the final composition of the keyboard. So, for instance, like if you use a very stiff material like this, like carbon fiber, usually the sound tends to be more high-pitched and loud. If you use a softer material, because of the density, it tends to be a little bit lower pitched. Now
we're using the carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber, yeah. So this is optional. This doesn't come with it. This is called a plate fork. This is a popular tool amongst enthusiasts to just help you install your switches.
It's like a little mini pitchfork.
Yeah. So what this does is this just sits between the PCB and the plate, and it will give you an even distance when you're pressing down. So before we move on, we got to also select switches, right? There's a huge variety of switches. The two main ones that people use are linears and tactile. So linears, there's no bump. When you press the actuation, it's smooth all the way down. When you have a tactile switch, there's a noticeable bump. And again, the nice thing about mechanical keyboards,
You can always change it.
you could always change
That's
it.
true. That's true.
And this PCB is a hot swap PCB, meaning you don't have to solder anything. We could just pop these in, and then if an hour passes and you're like, I don't like this, we could change it. So now we're going to install these. And yeah, some people, a lot of people wonder like why mechanical keyboards? And people have different things that they like, whether that's working on their vintage car, it's working on puzzles, playing with Legos, like something that feels like you're doing something, but you're not really thinking too hard about it. There's something where you're just tinkering. And for me, it's like I don't like to have idle hands. And this was one of these hobbies that I picked up during the pandemic that was just like, okay, I've built my entire place out. There's nothing left to build. Oh, a keyboard. Right?
Yeah.
There's something really fun, and I get into the zone a lot of times with this. It's meditative to a degree,
Like it's creative in a different way.
Creative in a different way.
It allows you to think about other things as you're doing it.
Yes.
Like literally we're on a podcast and
right.
And Matthew's like putting in keys, like these tiny screws as we're talking on the microphone, which is crazy. My question to you is, how much of your success would you attribute to like intuition and talent and maybe just something that just comes natural to you? And how much of it is literally just from hours and hours of practice and it's just clockwork because you've just done it so much? When it comes to creative work and producing output.
Yeah, I think it's definitely two parts, right? There's your innate talent, that all the things that you were born with, and then the skills that you develop on top of that. So I think it's both. So I've already been speaking about my curiosity, and that's, I think, one of my superpowers is that when I see something that interests me, the first instinct is reverse engineering it. Always. It's like, how does that work? How did you do that? Right? It's like, that's my approach towards people, but that's also with everything in my life. So I think I'm just wired that way, where I have a lot of curiosity. Then the other part, the practice part, I think luckily it comes with the curiosity, right? It's like, okay, what's this thing about mechanical keyboards? Let me learn about it. So I'll find all the different content creators out there, people who are putting out information, looking up different forums and learning all about the process and learning how to build one of these things. Then eventually I'll build my own, and then I get to actively practice, actively learn, right? There's a difference between passive learning, where you're reading or listening something, which if you look up the learning retention pyramid, that basically says, and this is something I learned from Chris, the learning retention pyramid, there's different styles of learning. There's passive learning and then active learning. Passive learning, like reading a book, listening to a lecture, watching a video, you'll retain about 5%, if maybe 15% at the most of that information. If you want to learn something and have it stick with you, you have to move into active learning. So active learning is like workshops, practicing, doing the thing yourself. And then the way you learn something and retain most of that information, you want to know what that is? It's teaching.
Oh, wow.
Teaching will net you like 90% retention based off of the learning retention pyramid, because it's the most active way to learn. And the reason being is when you're teaching somebody, you have to interpret the information. You have to turn it into digestible information for somebody else to understand and then perform. Just like how we're doing here with the keyboard stuff. I'm trying my best to give you the context of what is the part, what it does, and then how to do it. And then you're actively doing it, right? So then hopefully after this podcast and this session together, you would feel more confident to be able to build your own keyboard from scratch at home, right? So that is a long way of talking about retention when you're learning. For me, it's like the original question was about practice, right? So I'll pause there.
Yeah.
If you have a follow-up question, let me know.
No, that's actually fascinating. That was a mind-blowing concept just now that you shared. Because I do think a lot of creatives who are trying to level up in their business or in their creative work, they're passively learning a lot. Like they're consuming a lot of YouTube videos. They're consuming a lot of podcasts. Even this, like if you're listening to this is like kind of like a form of passive learning, I guess you could say. But you have to actually go out and do it to really retain that information if you're not actually doing it. And yeah, teaching, which actually makes sense because a lot of these content creators and freelancers, a natural kind of progression, evolution of their career is to get into teaching. And even if it's not like at a workshop or on stage necessarily, you'll oftentimes find these creatives who started out as photographers or videographers or designers. Then their content starts to change from just sharing their work to now sharing tips about their work, which is like the natural evolution, I would say, for a creative.
Yeah, and I mean the interesting about teaching is once you start,
I can do the I can try to do some of these.
Once you and it's a lot easier to push in now that there's there's tension all around. Yeah.
As soon as I saw that it was easier, I was like, let me get in there.
You want that satisfying tactility.
Yes.
I don't want to deprive you from that.
Yes.
It's one of those things is when you're teaching what it is that you've learned, it's valuable to somebody else. Like we talked about the concept earlier, plus minus equal. So if you're thinking about all the equals or minuses in your life or in your community or the people around you, when you're putting that information out there, guess what? They're avoiding the landmines. They're jumping ahead in their progress. So it's valuable to them. That's why a lot of these folks who are just sharing pretty generously online, they gain such a big following because they're just sharing generously, right? Like I know people sell courses and do stuff like that, but for the most part, I think a lot of folks are just genuinely passionate about sharing the things that they've done. It's another way to showcase their portfolio and knowledge, right? The putting inspiring work out there is one level, right? It inspires folks, but if you tell them how you did that, that pulls them even closer. Right? Let's say from far away, you see somebody who's doing backflips and you're like, whoa, what is that person doing? Catches your attention, right? And then all of a sudden they signal over to you like, hey, come here. I see you watching me. You want to learn how to do this? And like, maybe you're a little shy, like, oh, no, I'm okay. But for those people who's like, oh, I really want to learn how to do a backflip. Then all of a sudden you take 10 steps forward and then you listen to that person and then they start telling you, I was like, okay, first you do this, then you do this, and then you do this. And you might try a couple, 50 times, and then maybe you'll get it. Who knows? But it's that kind of, I think it's like being in that space where other people are willing to give the things that they've learned and earned. It's nice to surround yourself with people like that, digitally and in person, right? Making real life friends.
So it sounds like it's a bit of both. It's a bit of intuition. It's a bit of practice, but a lot of it has to do with curiosity and being open to learning. And that's both passive and active learning. Nice. Okay.
Yeah, I think your curiosity is something that is like a magnet, right? The stronger it is, the more you get pulled towards the things that you're interested in, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you just really have to develop that and be okay with how it's pulling you.
Yes, definitely. I would love to ask you a little bit, dive deep into just your perspective on the idea of progress. So where I'm getting at with that question is you do a lot of product development. Like literally we're touching a product that you have developed from start to finish, from like a scratch sketch to ideation to developing to prototyping to having an actual product. But even from the content creation side of things, you have a very extensive scripting process and you go from start to finish. There's just so much that a creative can do nowadays with ideas. Like there's not a shortage of ideas. I think ideas are plentiful. How do you like stay on track to get these things done? Like how do you shoot a YouTube video, finish it all the way through? How do you start having an idea to do a mechanical keyboard and then see it across the finish line? I guess like your relationship with progress.
Yeah, I think it's progress and productivity, right?
Yes.
So for me, this is probably a good thing and a bad thing. I don't really know. I'm not really trying to put judgment on it, but I know I'm a person who can only focus on one thing at a time. So everything else becomes a distraction. So when I'm working on any given project, usually I can only focus on that one thing. And when I try to switch gears and do something else, it slows down everything, right? So as much as I can, I try to focus only on one thing at a given time. With a project like a video, usually I will see that thing end to end. Like I'll pick it up, script it, shoot it, edit it, all in one sprint, meaning it's not really interrupted. I might do that over, 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something like that, just because I could focus on it. And I know if I have momentum, it moves so much faster. It's the most efficient way for me to work on a project. For something like manufacturing a keyboard, there's a lot of wait time where it's like, okay, you do a sprint and then you pause. You have to wait. You're forced to wait. And that's when I will pick up something else in the queue. For me, I manage all of my projects in Notion. I just have a big board with all of my projects.
Love
and
Notion.
everything is, in the queue, in progress, or it's done. And that's just how I manage everything. So I try to just move one item over, focus on that thing. And then when either I'm completed with that, it goes to complete. If it needs to pause and I have to wait for whatever reason, external factors, it goes back in the queue. And then I'm just focusing on the priority thing. So I just try to focus on one thing at a time. And that's the only way I feel like I could really get anything meaningful done.
Sure. That makes sense. What do you do in the cases then where, let's say because this happens to me sometimes. So I'm kind of selfishly asking this for myself, but maybe other people can relate. But you have a pipeline, Notion or your dashboard, productivity management tool, and you get this bottleneck. For some reason, there is a tile that's like, maybe it's a YouTube video, maybe it's an idea. It's just, how to do it. But for some reason, it feels like there's so much friction with trying to get a project done. Is your personality type to just get through it, push through, get it done, get it off your plate? Or are you the type of person to be more self-reflective where it's like, maybe there's a reason why there's a bottleneck and we're killing it, even if it's important, we're just getting it out of the way? Like, what's the best approach if you're feeling a lot of friction in creating a video, doing a product idea, like any creative idea, you feel friction? How do you get through that friction?
Yeah, I think it's a multi-part answer that's very contextual, right? It depends on what is the purpose of the project and how important that is. And then the other part is the part of yourself. Like there's external factors and then there's internal factors. External factors usually are things that you can't really control, right? If the client all of a sudden bumps up the deadline, then what are you going to do? If the whole world stops because everybody's working from home, what are you going to do? You have to pivot or stop or change. For me, whenever there's a bottleneck, a lot of the times it's because I'm overwhelmed or stressed out because there's too many things to do and they're all moving at a snail's pace, right? Right. So I've been in those positions before. And usually, I most of the time have the luxury of doing this because I just work on my own projects. There's not too many external factors, and I've kind of designed it that way, is I just take a break. It's like, I'm really frustrated right now. I'm going to stop working on this altogether. I'm just going to stop today. I'm done. And then I will do something that's going to relax me, something not to escape, but something to wind down so that I can gain perspective again. Like I'm not looking to jump to a distraction where it's like, all right, I'm going to pick up my phone and be on my phone for the next 15 hours. No, whatever that thing is, sometimes that's going out, sometimes that's, going for a meal, going to the park, doing something else, or working on another project that's more exciting and maybe more relaxing, doesn't require so much critical thinking and attention. Something that's just going to help me kind of detox from the thing that's kind of causing me a little bit of challenge so that I can breathe and then I can reflect and be like, okay, let me pick this back up. I got my second win. I got my energy again. Sometimes at those moments too, it's like you get very emotional. And at those moments, that's when I usually have to reflect. Like, what am I feeling and why am I feeling this way? So it's not just the symptom, but understanding where the symptom comes from. I'll give you an example where I had to kill a project, something that I thought was very precious to me. Not long after I quit my job at the Futur and went on my own, it just seemed like the world had opened up to me. Literally, the world was opening up where, the work from home thing started to loosen up quite a bit. And then all of these opportunities started jumping at me. One of those opportunities was a publishing deal. They're like, hey, do you want to write a book? I was like, yes. It kind of made sense for me at the time because I love telling stories. I was looking for new mediums, ways to challenge me to become a better storyteller. I've already taught some stuff. I have content out there. It seems a natural progression for me to also be an author. And so I went through this process. I got a deal for the book. I started writing this book. I was probably a third of the way in, but at every stage of the process, I started feeling friction, a little bit of friction where I feel like I'm compromising. It's like, that's not how I would have done it, but I'm working with this publisher. And, I'm maybe it's just me, but I'll push through it. And there was a certain point where I'm a third of the way done with the whole book creation process. And basically, they wanted to take the book in a different direction than I had originally seen it. And I was like, oh, this makes me feel weird. I left that call with my editor feeling very weird, like, why do I feel like this? And I couldn't quite articulate it. And I had told my wife, and she looked at me right away and she said, F it, F them. And I was like, huh? And she's like, F them, like they're making you write their book. You should be writing your book. And she luckily she's always been a really, really good sounding board for me. She's a great partner where she could help articulate the emotions better than I can. I'm not good at articulating my emotions, but she could see it and feel it. And so she's like, I could see you stressed out every day. Like, why are you even doing this? And they're making you do things that you shouldn't have to do. This is your book. She's just basically reminding me the thing of like why I got into this into the first place, why I agreed to do this. And then at that point, I had to just check myself. It's like, this is an ego thing. It's like, I keep pushing through this, even though I'm getting that spidey sense tingle. It's like, this is weird, but maybe it's just me. She was able to articulate it because we're close like that. And I was like, you know what? You're right. So after that meeting, I wrote up an email basically saying, I'm stepping out of the deal. I'm done. We're not going to progress any further. Like, this is a hard line that we had passed. I just feel like I'm filling your pages rather than writing the book I want to write. And they came back and they were willing to make changes on their end to accommodate. But at that point, I was just like, you know what? No, this is already done. It was one of those things where it's like, I wasn't enjoying the process anymore. It's like, why do I even want this? I did that reflection point. It's like, I'm feeling weird. Why am I feeling weird? Well, it's because I'm not writing the thing that I want to make. It's like, well, why did I want to do that in the first place? I was like, because I wanted to be a published author. But why did I even want that? And then it's like, that's just an ego thing. Like, I didn't have a great answer for that question. I asked myself why. Usually that's a good way to get to the bottom of something. Just ask yourself why 3 times. And if you can't answer why 3 times, then you probably don't have a good answer. You're like, I should not even be doing this. So at that point, it's just like, all right, I'm done. I have a partially written book that will maybe get cooked someday, but it's on the back burner. But it was one of those things where I was like, I was doing too much, and this one thing was just not fitting in my ecosystem. It was just not right for me. But I thought it was, because I think a lot of people would love to say, hey, I'm a published author.
I'm like, this is why we do the pod, because I'm fully like involved with this conversation right now. I kind of forgot we were recording for a second. Thank you for sharing that story. That is an amazing story, in the sense of what the question was, which is like, when do you kill a project? When do you act on the friction that you're feeling with anything, in the creative field? So thank you for sharing that story. In the meantime, while you were finishing your story and I was listening, I finished the keyboard.
Ooh,
So
almost.
Almost, or like finished the keys at least.
Yeah.
So what's the next step from here?
Okay, so we have our switches installed. We have our stabilizers and plate installed. So this is majority of the internals now completed. So what we're going to do is we're going to now mount this inside the chassis.
Oh, okay. The fun part. The fun
Fun part.
So I'm unscrewing
Yeah. So
the back of this.
Yeah. So we're going to remove these fasteners
Okay.
so we could separate the chassis, and we're going to put our internals in there.
Okay, perfect. So as I'm unscrewing this, if there was like 1 to 3 tips that, you know, absolutely crucial that if you didn't have right now, and you could have saved years, maybe shaved off years in your growth or where you are, is there anything that you would tell your younger self?
Usually my answer to this question is that I wouldn't change anything about how I grew up. Because all of the things that have happened have led me to the person who I am today. So I would be very afraid with messing with time in that sense, where it's like, oh, if I give myself the shortcut, how would that actually change, right? Like, would I be less humble? Would I be more confident? Like, would I actually get an advantage or not? Because some of these things, if you know what your future is, then it kind of makes it less exciting to go on your journey. So like I was telling you earlier, it's like, I barely know what I'm going to be doing next week. Like, that's how far ahead I see. I think people who have it all planned out, I kind of never related to or could understand, right? People who I went to high school with, and they're like, oh, I'm going to become a doctor. So they already have their next 10, 15 years blocked out for them. For me, I was still scratching my head. It's like, I don't even know what school I'm going to go to. I didn't plan for this. So I could never relate to people like that who have these really long-term goals, because everything changes. I would say, if you actually want me to answer the question, like, what would I give to a younger person, not myself? Because I wouldn't change my development. I'm very happy with who I am, and just like have accepted everything about me to this point, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
definitely. So I guess maybe through the lens then of a younger individual, not even younger, but just young in their creative journey,
right?
Not age-wise, young in their creative journey, to level up,
right?
And get into the rooms they want to get into the projects they want to get into, work with the brands that they want to work with. What does that look like?
I mean, I think this is going to be the theme of the podcast here, but curiosity, community, and then consistency, right? I think it's those 3 things that, again, curiosity, it's like, develop that, ask good questions, anything that catches your interest, take it a level deeper. Don't just stay surface level, which I think a lot of people, whenever they find something that they're interested in, they stay on the Google search level worth of knowing what that is. Like, they stay on the surface level of knowing whatever that thing is, where you can go so much deeper by just asking more and more questions. Well, how does that work? Well, how does that work? And why do you need that? And why do you need this part? How do these things work together? And just really developing that sense of curiosity, because you will find that will unlock the world for you of how everything works. And when you know how everything works as a creative person, you can connect the dots, right? That's all creativity is you're connecting 2 or more disparate things together where other people can't see it. It's like, this and then this. If we connect them together, that totally makes sense. All right, that's I think the role of a creative, right? So really developing that curiosity so you can see the dots in the world to connect. The second part is community. So again, just surrounding yourself with folks and that are also doing things, right? The equals, the minus, the pluses, right? Find these people who could be your mentors in the space, whether they're willing to give you their time or not. You could study people who are incredible at what they do. There's a lot of folks in the space that I personally get inspired by, like the Ali Abdals of the world, the Chris Does of the world. Luckily, I got to learn from him firsthand, but like the Justin Says, like they're all at different stages in their career. They've all done amazing things in their career. And that helps drive me because I could see how someone else has done it, people who I could relate to them on different levels, but it gives me different points of references, again, dots to connect for myself. Because I'm not trying to follow somebody else's path exactly. I'm just trying to learn a little bit from everybody that I meet And the more interesting people I surround myself with, the more points of interest and information that I can learn and then develop myself further, right? I have more crayons in my box, more colors to color with as a creative if I surround myself with more colorful people, right? People who are just doing different things, interesting things that will help, again, develop the curiosity. And then the last thing is consistency, right? So if you want to do something and you want to be good at it, you have to go at it every single day. You just got to keep doing it over and over and over and over and over until you get to that point of proficiency, to the point where you're just like, I could build this whole thing without even looking. Maybe I could do it blindfolded. I don't know, but I could at least walk and talk and do this and not have to think so much about what it is that I'm doing because it's already become second nature, right? So at that point, once you're familiar with all the tools that you don't even have to think about it, then it shortcuts the process between your idea and the final product, right? There's nothing, less barriers in the way of like, oh, I want to take this type of photograph, or I want to shoot this kind of shot. And if you have to think about all the 20 steps it's going to take to do that, it's like, cool, that's cool. Maybe the first couple times you're doing it, you're learning. But if you keep doing that over and over, all of those 20 steps, it's like you're doing that automatically and you're like, dude, I'm set. It's like, now I can capture the shot. I can capture any shot. And then I think that's what's really important. It's just getting really consistent with your practice so that your tools are so sharp that when the time comes, it's like you're ready to capture that opportunity.
I love that. I love that so much.
Okay, so we're here. We have our internals built. So we have our chassis open. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to mount this inside the keyboard. And with this keyboard, we have our mounting blocks. So this Mode keyboards use a very interesting mounting style that they've pioneered. It's called the lattice block system. So these are the mounting blocks that we just opened up here.
Whoa, they look like little, like pasta.
Yeah, it's a Voronoi pattern that's 3D printed.
Yeah.
And each of these have a different softness level, right? So I prefer, so they have really soft ones. They have kind of like a medium soft one. So you can kind of tell the difference between this. This is the softest style. That's you can feel it's a little bit more dense. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This is a half lattice, meaning like it's squishy, but then half of it is solid.
Nice.
This one's pure solid, so you really will get no flex on that. And then there's also a top mount style. But I think what I recommend to start with is using the full lattice, which is the softest one.
Okay.
To me, that usually produces a better sound, and it also has like just a nice bounce to it when you're typing.
Okay. Perfect.
Because I noticed you like that. You made a comment on that when you were typing on the white and copper one.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go with this one then.
So you'll notice there's two different kinds here. There's
there's like a shaped one.
So all the rectangle ones, those are going to be the three on the top. So you'll see grooves on the bottom of the chassis that correlate with that. So these are going to be the rectangular ones, and then these are going to be the angled ones right there. So when you do this, you're just going to take this. There's a little sleeve. You just insert that right there.
Very cool. Okay. One thing I appreciated about your process in general is just your attention to detail when it comes to pitches, when it comes to sharing your process. A lot of creatives struggle with this. Mm-hmm. Can you share a little bit about your process of, when you have an idea or a vision or a pitch? I guess it's so hard because it's obviously, it varies on the project, right? Like a pitch for one project is not the same as the other project. Mm-hmm. But do you have some like fundamental principles when it comes to relaying an idea to said brand, or when brand asks you, okay, what do you have in mind? Like, what does that process typically look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think any successful pitch or proposal, the whole purpose of that is to illustrate your vision to the other person, articulate that idea, and get them as excited as you are about it. I think those are the main purposes of that vehicle. So if you're not doing those things, then why would somebody want to sign off if they're not excited about it too, right? So being able to articulate your idea, that just requires you to practice writing, you to practice speaking. And in my early creative director days, luckily, I had a lot of seniors around me. People have been doing this for many years ahead of me. And I would work with them, I would shadow them, and I would just learn from their pitches. So I would, at the end of the day or in between projects, I would just be reading their pitches. Like, how did they assemble this pitch deck? How did they put this together? And other people have published their stuff online too, so you can kind of see that. But I'm just learning, like, how did they format these things? How did they talk about a particular concept? And for me, I think after going through many years of that and just understanding how people react and how I like to communicate things, I think it's always good to just give the briefest overview of whatever your concept is. So if you could tell your concept in one sentence, it's a strong concept. If you need more than that, it's probably not a great concept yet. Right? So that would be the trick. It's like whatever your idea is, whatever your concept is, try and boil it down to 1 or 2 sentences at the most. That way, that's your lead-in, right? That's the guy over there doing backflips. You're like, oh, that looks interesting. What is that thing, right? So if you have a strong overview or like a log line, kind of like that for your pitch, like what is this concept? And if you could do that in a sentence or 2, maybe pair that with a nice image or something to draw somebody in. It's like, okay, take me to the next step, right? So what's the next fundamental thing that you need to know? Now that you got the person's attention, you might start to point out either the problem and or opportunity, right? So here's the overview of the thing. Before I tell you what it is, let's give it some context. Because if absent of context, like any idea may be good or bad, right? People could just judge it like, oh, I don't like that idea. It reminds me of this. But if you give them context, like, here's how it solves this problem that we just gave you context for. Here's your challenge as a client, or here's the opportunity within the community or ecosystem of where you're playing at right now. And here's how that idea solves that. And here's the concept. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it just makes sense. It fits like a glove. Like this is supposed to be this way. Right? So if you make it obvious for somebody by giving them breadcrumbs, by slowly unraveling that onion first, just like any good video, starting with a hook and then giving them context and then giving them step by step until they get to the end, they're like, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. Like why we would work with you on this particular concept, because it makes sense for what it is that we're doing. I think most people, and I did this early on a lot in my creative career, I was so focused on what's the idea and how cool can I make the idea absent of understanding the context of where it's going to be, right? Not thinking a little bit more thoroughly about how this might impact somebody's business or the things that they're trying to accomplish. It's just more like, hey, I saw this cool trick last week and I want to apply it to this project. And I did that a lot in my early career. And I think a lot of creative folks are like that too, because they don't think about the full picture. It's like, it's form and function, right? It has to look cool. It has to do something, and it has to serve a purpose, right? It has to serve a purpose, and it also has to be packaged in a way that's, within the trend or kind of makes sense for what you're applying it to.
Concept and context.
Yes.
That is awesome. I have a follow-up question to that, but I just got done with putting these things in.
So you could see, like, this is
it has some
nice flex,
some squish to it. Yeah.
So before we close the chassis, what we're going to do is we're going to install the daughter board.
Cool. So I got this little daughter board. Why is it called daughter board?
Motherboard, daughter board. So I think it's a motherboard. I think. I don't know why in my mind I was like spelling it as like DODDER, but it's like daughter, because a motherboard, daughter board. Yeah. Okay. I would assume. I think this is. We call this a PCB, but it could technically be the motherboard for this device.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So this is the daughter board cable. This is a JST cable. So we're gonna plug in, matching the pins. There's like 5 little pins on the inside of that. It's on the top, and we're gonna pair it with this. With the PCB. So those two things are going to connect. And that way, when you plug in your peripheral, your device, this will connect to your computer.
Makes sense. I feel like a pain point a lot of people run into is the budget question. Everyone loves the budget question. Okay. Question for you is, what is the right answer? Do you say the number first, or do you let the client tell them what their number is?
Usually I try to ask them first. Okay. And I ask them first when I know there's an opportunity to make a lot of money, right? When I was like, I don't know how deep your pockets are. So I'm going to ask you first, like what kind of budget do you have for this? Or what kind of budget are you looking to invest in this project for this outcome that we've already determined via call or email or something like that? But usually if it's a client where on the surface they feel pesky, meaning like I don't really want to work with them. On the surface, like all the signs, maybe there's a few red flags there. Like I don't really want to work with them. Then I will give them a really high number, like an FU number. And to the point where if they say yes, they're interested, then I'd be willing to take their call. And
then you can get interested about it.
Then I can get interested about it. And this was something I also learned from Chris Do, my mentor. I think he said this on a couple of his pieces of content. Yeah. It's like if the client calls and you're angry or upset and you don't want to answer that call, it's because you didn't charge enough. So
say that one more time.
If you see your client calling you or emailing you and you don't want to answer it, it's because you didn't charge enough.
That's fire. That's so true.
Yeah, so I do this, like I think about that up front. So if there's somebody where I'm like, I don't really want to work with you, but if you're this tall, then you can ride the ride. And for you, it's over here, right? It's like, it depends who's coming to the door, right? Mm-hmm. You have to be kind of like a bouncer for your own inbox sometimes. And you can come up with your own arbitrary rules of who gets led into the club or not, right? You're like, I only want cool people only in here. Sorry, but if you pay me enough, then you could be cool too. Like you could, you can buy in here. But even at a certain point, like even with a lot of money, because I've had projects like this where they're willing to fork over a giant amount of money for a project, still have to say no because it's like, I'm going to be pulling all of my hair out by the end of this. It's simply not worth it. Mm-hmm. The emotional tax and stress it's going to put me through is not going to be worth it. Okay, so when you plug in this JST cable, it's just, you already got it. Perfect. And you looked at the pins at the top.
The 5 with the 4.
Yeah.
Yes.
Love it. Look how intuitive this is now. So now what we're going to do is like now that this is all aligned, we're going to flip this over and put the fasteners in. But when you pick it up, just kind of hold the top and bottom because they're loose right now, right? Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead and flip that over and then you can kind of hold one side. Great. Fantastic. And now you're going to get your fasteners. Switch. Yeah, look, I don't even have to say anything. Active learning.
Active learning. I literally feel comfortable doing this now. Like
I love it.
Nice. Okay. So I really like how you have the FU number for when clients reach out to you. That's actually really good strategy, especially if you're unsure about what their budget might be. And if you're kind of, they're kind of pesky, you feel like there will be a lot. Mm-hmm. You don't want a headache of a client.
Right.
For the budget though, how are you able to feel comfortable with charging more and more each time? Like obviously you have a rate that there's a general rate that everyone usually starts at. Mm-hmm. How do you continue to climb that ladder of charging more for your services as you get more skills? Mm-hmm. And how do you actually what are you literally saying to the client to be able to justify your price increases?
Basically, the more you have of value, the more you can charge, right? So if clients are calling you every day, you have the power of choice and leverage there. So you can say no all you want to most of them because there's going to be 5 more inquiries tomorrow. And so you have the power of leverage there. And most of the people, there's few people who are willing to pay your higher rates. But, if you say yes to everyone, then you make no space for them. If you say no, you make tons of space for the people that can actually afford the rates that you want to charge, right? So as you move forward with your career, you'll realize if people keep saying yes to the budgets that you're presenting, you're probably not charging enough. And you can just start adding a little bit, whatever increment makes you feel comfortable. So if you're charging 10K for something, maybe you charge 11K next time because it's not that big of a difference between 10K and 11K, right? So you might just keep adding it. Or if you're feeling a little bit more generous, like, hey, it's been a year since I updated my base price for something. Let me just jump to 20K. I'm just going to double it and then see what happens. You can even try that with a past client too, or somebody you already have rapport with. and you've already worked on projects together, you could just say like, once you're talking about a new project, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm estimating the budget for this is going to be 20K. And then they might ask like, whoa, why is it so expensive? Like, last time we only paid 10. And you don't really have to justify it. Like, I try not to justify anything. I just try to say, it's like, times are different. Things change all the time. My business has grown. Things has changed. Like, if you really want to justify, you can say those things. But for the most part, I try not to justify it. Everything is per project basis. Everything's contextual, right? It's like, for me to do this project, it's going to cost 20K, right? And they might start pulling out other comparables. It's like, well, Joe down the street can do it for 5. It's like, then work with Joe. It's like, in my mind, what I learned in advertising, something that Chris and I've learned from the experience, is when you go into these situations, don't be desperate, because people can smell the desperation on you. So if you're willing to bend at every single thing that they request of you, like, hey, can you cut the budget 5K? Sure, no thing. Hey, can we add 10 shots to the shot list? Sure, no thing. Then you have no power there. They're going to just keep asking and asking and asking. They're going to get a fantastic deal. But if you exercise the power of no, because you're confident, like, this is what it's going to take to do this thing with me, for me to do this thing, then you could just stand by that number. So sometimes I've had rates kind of fluctuate sometimes, like with sponsorships. And I know I charge a lot more than I think a lot of other folks, because I have things that I can leverage. The things that I could leverage are my average view count is relatively high, like on my YouTube, for instance. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I could use as leverage.
It's one avenue.
It's one avenue. The other thing is, like, I only produce a video maybe once a month, maybe every other month. So the space is very limited. It's like, hey, sometimes I will have a bidding war on a particular video.
Oh, wow.
Because it's like, I get inquiries every day.
Sure.
99% of it is junk, because it's just like, does not fit, right? It's not the right product, or I know they don't have the right budget. I could already tell, because I've never heard of the brand. It's like, okay,
yeah,
that's already a red flag for me. If it's a brand, it's like, it's a prominent big brand that I've heard of, and so it's even better if I use them somehow, then it's even better, right? And it's like, okay, come in closer, let's talk more. My wording is like, I just have an email template it's 2 clicks, and then that's how I respond to most inquiries. It's like, okay, see, this is an inquiry. They're asking about an integration. It's like, I have a template for that. So I just click on the template.
Nice.
Depending on who it is, sometimes I might change that number, but there's always my minimum rate. So it's like, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. My minimum level engagement is this, and my rates go up from there depending on scope and usage. To learn more about me and my content, here's a sponsorship deck. Let me know if you have any questions. So that's already all set up. Everything's set up in there, my rates and everything. And I make sure to say that it's my minimum level of engagement, meaning that's not my price.
It goes up from there.
It goes up from there. It starts there, right?
That's good.
So I don't know anything about the scope. Sometimes they will outline it in the email already. They're like, hey, we want a 60-second integration. We want usage for 3 months. And then right from there, I kind of do a little just napkin math, and I start like tackling numbers there. So it's like, here's my base rate, but then for a usage fee for 3 months, here's that additional fee. But again, my rates go up on there until we get to discuss scope and anything else.
What's in the sponsorship deck? Like, if you don't mind me asking, like a little bit, zooming in on that a little bit. Like, is it a Notion page? Is it literally a deck? Like, what's inside of your sponsorship deck? Is it like a media kit, essentially?
Yeah, it's a media kit.
Okay.
So it's just a PDF that gives, again, the overview of who I am, some context of some of the things that I do, past examples, and then some of the types of sponsorships I'm interested in. So we'll try and just paint a picture, right? Because I also don't want to box people in. I want to give people ideas of what it could be, but I don't want to box it in, because sometimes you will have some of these rare opportunities where people don't want a 60-second integration. They want more than that. They might want to do some kind of live activation at an event that they're throwing, right? And then all of a sudden it doesn't quite fit the mold. So you just have to kind of paint a general picture of what it could look like, but leave enough space so that you can discuss the budget and what the concept and actual execution is going to be.
I think that there's a common theme actually in a lot of your processes and your approach. I feel like context is a big thing in your process. Like whether that's a deck, whether that's your studio, whether that's your pitch, like giving context and doing a very good job at painting the picture around what the context is. I feel like it's a huge part of the sell, of your brand, and in general. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's
the context
correct.
is huge.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm learning that right now as I'm talking to you. It's like, oh my gosh, like do I give enough context when I'm trying to achieve something, when I'm trying to get to a certain result?
Yeah.
Or am I just putting something out there with no context, hoping it somehow brings some sort of return to me?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something that I learned, again, having to pitch to clients, always because of what you were asking earlier, to justify any given idea or decision, right? So we might be on a call, we're midway through a project, and they're like, hey, I see you changed that scene. Why did you do that? Or why did you pick red? Or why did you use this typeface here? And early on in my career, I was like, I thought it looked cool. That's not a great answer, you know? Maybe they agree with you, but they might be like, yeah, well, I like this typeface instead. I like blue better. So what I've learned over the years is to provide context for everything. It's like the reason why we use this typeface here and why we made this font so big is because we wanted this offer to be highly legible and come at this point, you know, based off of the parameters of the project, your goal was to sell this thing and make sure that people understand what it is that your product does. So we made these decisions based on that. So that's what I get to basically justify every single decision we made. It's not an arbitrary one. It's not just because it's cool. It's because it's actually serving a purpose. And because I do that, I also challenge my designers and the people that I would work with, anybody who's working with me. I also have them present their ideas in the context of the project. So if they paint a cool frame for me or, you know, sketch some storyboards, I usually ask them to present it in the state of how I present it to the client. It's like, you know, how does this solve the problem? Like, you know, why did we do this? And if they don't have a good answer, then it's like, well, here's how we can work that. Because I just need to be able to sell this. You're making something for me that needs to be useful to me so that I can make something that's useful to them. And absent of context, people will just make up their own story. They'll see a thing like you chose that font or you chose that color or outfit or whatever, but it makes no sense to me. It doesn't connect to anything I'm doing. But if you do the breadcrumbs, and it's like, here's how I came to this decision and here's why I chose this, then you have something that's very defensible. And then when the client or whoever else you're working with tries to change that, all you can ask is like, you know, how does that solve the challenge? If they don't have a great answer, then it's like, is that a good note? Is that good feedback? But if they're like, well, I feel like it's not that legible, so what I would do is this. It's like, okay, I see. Now I'm understanding your intent. Because you, the client, gave me context, I understand you just want this to be more legible. Is it okay if I take some liberty as to how to solve that? Because you're suggesting hot pink type. I don't know if that's going to work. I'll try that. But I'd like to try a couple of other things, knowing your intent, right? And then that just makes conversations a lot more clear. And it makes the process so much smoother because people have an understanding of where ideas are coming from rather than just like, oh, I'm a creative and I'm just arbitrarily pulling this out of space or because it's a cool reference I saw last week. It's like, no, this is very intentional and I'm doing this for a reason. And I think everybody does stuff for a reason. You just have to go through that process in your brain like, wait, why did I choose this? And I learned this by working with interns. Right, I was a creative director. I had interns that would come in fresh to blind when I was working there. And they would do some work for me. And then I would sit down with them and review their work. And I would change something. And they would ask, why did you do that? And at first I didn't have a great answer. I was like, why did I do that? Because I just moved a bunch of stuff around in Photoshop. And then it got me thinking about that process. And then eventually I was able to articulate, well, it's like, okay, I'm going to change the type to do this because I want it to be more legible. That's why I'm making this bigger. So when you're approaching this, intern or whoever I'm working with, it's like, I just want you to think in a similar way. If we're going to do these things, think about how this impacts what it is we're doing as a whole.
I love that. That was a really good answer to my question because the context is huge. And I do think that is something that creatives sometimes almost pride themselves on, like, oh, I'm a creative. So it's like, I I take abstract thoughts and put it into a video or put it into whatever. But like one thing I picked up from you is as well is taking in the business talk in mind. Because when it comes to brand deals, when it comes to brand negotiations, you can't always have that like creative fairy dust. Like you need to put your ideas into something that gives context. That's something that like is not just only makes sense in your head, but makes sense in like their head too. And that is a skill that you need to practice. That's something you need to like consciously make an effort to try and learn how to do. So that was a bunch of good tips on that one. So thank you for that. Now I have the keyboard closed up though. So I'm assuming we just put the keys on now.
Yeah, these are the keycaps. These ones are the Mode Obscura keycaps. They're white on black keycaps.
Nice.
These are very nice. You tried some over there. Yeah, you could just pop that open and then we can start mounting them. Okay. And then you can push down heavy with your thumb. So because there's all kinds of different makers for different parts of the keyboard, like different manufacturers for all this stuff. Sometimes the tolerances are just slightly different. They're all based off of old Cherry stuff because Cherry was the originator of this MX style switch. The Cherry profile, that's where it comes from, which is kind of ubiquitous with this kind of sculpted keycap. So everything is based off of that spec. Everybody is just making products around that spec.
Got it.
And sometimes the tolerances are a little different.
Got it. So kind of getting to the tail end here as I put these keys. This is the last step, right?
Yeah, this is the last step.
Okay. So we're just like the home stretch of building this amazing keyboard. From the outside looking in, someone can come look at your brand and you have everything absolutely dialed to a T. Everything from the links on your website, not a single broken link can be found. Everything from your blog write-ups, like everything is just very meticulous. But do you ever deal with like mental health or like imposter syndrome or just feeling like what you're doing is not enough? Like, it's very easy to assume that someone like yourself is just, operating at a very high level at 24/7. Do you have those internal dialogues at all that you struggle with at times? And if so, like, how do you get through those points? Aside from taking a break, but walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm human, right? So I take my work seriously, but I try not to take myself seriously, and I try to make sure that things are balanced in my mind, in my health, and in my life, right? So whenever things are unbalanced, or if there's an imbalance somewhere, it will usually appear somewhere as a symptom in my life, whether that's in a relationship or me just feeling gross, right? Health-wise, like I will notice the symptoms, right? I try to pay attention of how I feel, both physically and mentally. And just like I was sharing earlier, I try to understand where that's coming from. Where is the problem, right? So like we've been discussing, it's like, yeah, from the outside, it does look like things are aligned and things are working. And for the most part, I always strive for that. But I'm human and I also experience emotion, heartache, and days where I don't feel like doing anything, where I don't feel productive or motivated. And on those days, I really just try to listen to myself. I do have those days of internal dialogue. When things are really heavy, I will write. Like I have a journal that I used to use the 5-minute journal. That was a really easy segue into me just getting into the habit of reflecting every day. If you're unaware of that, like that, you could find that on Amazon or pretty much any bookstore, the 5-minute journal. Very simple because they just give you prompts to fill it at the beginning of the day and then at the end of the day. The beginning is about trying to aspirationally project what it is that you would like to accomplish that day and celebrate the things that you're feeling. And at the end of the day, it's the same thing, kind of celebrating some of the things that you've accomplished that day, as well as reflecting on what you could do better. So it's very simple prompts, but I think once you get into the habit of that, then it just becomes something that you think about all the time, right? It's like, what went wrong today? And usually those are moments where if I'm feeling really bad about something, whether it's the work or just me emotionally, I'll think about, well, what went wrong today? Why am I feeling that way? What can I do better? And that usually helps me find an objective path to correct things moving forward, whether that's the day after or the week after, or however I choose to move forward on that. And then, so that gives me a plan for how to tackle it. I'm still feeling not good about it, right? It's like, okay, I have a plan for how I can tackle that. If I'm trying to think about how I can improve my well-being at that point, that's where I get into the reflection. Well, what went right today? What can I be thankful for? What am I grateful for? And usually that has to do with, I have this internal dialogue of, I'm really thankful and grateful for my family, my health, my mind, my creativity, my being able to do the things that I do, being able to still walk, to still be able to enjoy the food that I eat, the activities that I get to share with friends and all the things. So I get into this more kind of gratitude mentality of just thinking about all the things that are going right in my life. And usually that helps uplift me to get me out of sometimes sluggish or dark places where it's like, shoot, there's a lot of good things going on right now. I'm just kind of overcome by all the negative things right now. And I just need to shine a light, just look at the other side of the coin. Like, actually, there's a lot of things that are actually right with my life right now.
I think mental health is a important topic to talk about in the sense of creativity, because something about the climate of social media we live in right now is very like supercharged. It's like content every day, scrolling every day. People are caught in doom scrolling every day. Not everyone, but I'm super guilty of it sometimes, and I hate to admit when that happens, and like I feel guilty about it, but also when I'm not putting out the work that I want to put out, it's like a bad cycle, and I'm sure everyone can relate to that to some degree.
Yeah.
Do you have something you want to say?
I was gonna say, I think it's not just doom scrolling.
Yeah.
It's doom creating too. I think I see a lot of folks, and I've been in this position before, but I've developed a healthier relationship with my creative output.
Whoopsie, I just put the wrong key.
It's okay.
How
so
do I take it out?
To take it out, you're going to use this keycap puller. So you just want to like put that like around the keycap. Yeah. So basically these wires are going to go underneath.
Oh, like this?
Yep. And then you just pull that out. There you go.
Oh, okay. That was actually a good mess up because I know now.
So you're going to grab those over there. Yeah. So I think there's also doom creating, which in my mind is when creatives become a machine feeding the machine. And I think a lot of folks who create content for platforms, I think all the good ones understand how the platforms work, right? You research it, you understand like, oh, how do I make a hit on this platform? I want to know what levers to pull so that this is successful. My work is seen from people. But what happens, and it comes from a great place, which is I want people to see my creative work. I think what happens over time, like once you understand, so that's a 6.25U, we're going to use the 7U. I think what happens over time is that people get so attuned to the algorithms that they're only serving the algorithms and they're no longer serving their creativity and the things that bring them joy, or the things that their art form, the reason why they got into this in the first place. So it's unfortunate to see people go through that. But eventually what happens is they burn out, they take some time away, and then they reconfigure how it is they operate, right? But it usually takes that level of burnout where they become a machine. And it's like, to me, there is a loss of creativity there because you're just on overdrive. You're not giving yourself any rest. And your whole purpose is now to get the numbers rather than it is to actually make meaningful work to you.
Yeah, right? I think that's a constant battle for a lot of creatives nowadays. So then in your case, continuing that conversation, what has been your relationship with social media in trying to stay, I guess, quote unquote, relevant while still fueling your creativity and putting out, even if it's as simple as a reel, like something that you're proud of? Mm-hmm. Like where do you find that balance, Yeah. Because obviously everyone's one of their goals is to grow on social, right? Like that's just like how it is. But obviously some people lean more heavier on that than others. But yeah, what is your relationship with that?
Yeah, I think because I've been doing it for a couple of years now and had a prior career in working in advertising, working on TV commercials, I've luckily had a lot of road behind me where I could look back and reflect on what it is that I like, what it is I don't like, and what do I even want out of my own creative endeavors. So I've had enough experience in there to understand those things, right? You don't know what you don't know until you know, right? You don't know what you like or dislike unless you have something else to compare it to, right? So until you've traveled that road and done that journey, you might not know yet, and that's okay, right? So because I've just taken many steps in a direction and kind of changed directions multiple times throughout my career, it's like I could look back and always remind myself, it's like, oh, I really enjoyed that, or I did not enjoy that part of my life. And then I could pick it apart. It's like, why did I enjoy that, or why didn't I enjoy that? If I really enjoyed something, it's like, well, what was I doing there? It's like, oh, I was, really new and green to this endeavor. So everything was new and interesting to me. And I was very curious. It's like, oh, maybe I need to approach it that way or find something else where I'm lit up in that same way, right? That will kind of change gears. If I didn't like an experience, well, why was that? I was like, maybe I didn't charge enough to this client. Maybe I gave myself too little time. Maybe I put too much expectation on something, or maybe I was so tuned into the algorithm and what everyone else was doing that I'm not even making the thing that I wanted to make. And so just having those moments of pausing and reflecting on things that I've done helps guide the way to where I can go, right? So it's like, oh, so if I'm moving forward and I want to have a fresh take on my content and what I put out there, I have to love it first. I have to really enjoy it first. Like, what is the subject? What am I nerding out about right now? It's like, maybe it's this designing this custom mechanical keyboard because I just spent the last year learning how to design, learning how to manufacture with my partners, and going through this process of testing and prototyping and getting to the point where now I have something that I could share with other people, right? And it's like, I'm going to make content on this because I'm passionate about this right now. I have so much content. I just have to now figure out a way that's going to be interesting and digestible for somebody else. But I know for me, I'm passionate about it. Now I can try to figure out how to show this in a way that will be as interesting to other people. And with a lot of the things that I personally put out there, I've done this myself in the past, and I've also been victim of this, where sometimes you see what's trending and then you just follow the trend. You see a piece of content that has really good bits inside, and you might just lift those things up. And I've done that myself. I'm a sinner there too, right? But I've also had that happen to me. It was like, wow, that's line for line my video. And
for sure.
It's like, I feel a certain way about it, but at the same time, it's like, I think there's a passage in the Bible where it's like, let he who has not committed sin cast the first stone. And then everybody walks away. And I forgot what part it is. I'm not that well versed in that Bible, but I kind of think about that sometimes, where it's like, shoot, I've sinned before. I've done this. Like, who am I to judge?
Sure.
Let me just walk away from that. Let them learn. They're gonna learn. And so I share this because, I think you just need to travel in the direction. You need to kind of try things and experiment and find what it is that you like, don't like, and not get caught up in trying to push the number so much, right?
Or compare,
Yeah, or compare. It's just like, I just want to do my thing and do that well, because when you're most yourself, I think that's where you're going to attract the most people who are just like you. And that's the audience that you want. That's the community that you want, is your fellow tribes people that can relate to the things that you relate on, right? Otherwise, like, what's the point of having 1 million subscribers if nobody's tuning in?
That's so true. And also something food for thought for listeners as well is, I feel like everyone loves to go viral. Like it's a thing people are fascinated with. Like, oh my gosh, like this post went viral. Like it's killing it. But at the same time, people don't realize that if you don't go viral for the right thing, you're quite literally imploding the work that you've done almost to that point. Because if your algorithm is now trying to force you into a bucket, but you want to do something else, it's actually pretty hard to rework, like getting back to where you want it to go. So sometimes people they go out viral for something random, then they realize that they have like identity crises now because they have a huge audience of people that want them to do this.
Right.
But that was just like a sidebar and they really want to do this. It happens all the time with content. So it's actually good to have a bit of a slow burn, in my opinion. At least that's what I've come to. For me, that helps me.
Yeah, it reminds me of that scene. I don't know if you watched The Office at all.
Yes.
But there was a part where there was their new boss. It was Idris Elba. He's not really the boss. He's just kind of stepping in and filling in while they find a manager. And no, I'm sorry. It was Will Ferrell. When Will Ferrell was the temp manager, Andy Bernard was trying to make a first impression, and then he made Will Ferrell laugh. It's like, oh, funny guy. And then Andy's like, oh, I guess this is who I am now. And the rest of the episode, he was trying to do funny things to impress the boss because he was the funny guy. Because every time Will Ferrell saw him, he's like, oh, funny guy. And he's like,
yeah,
where's the laugh? And then Andy would just kind of make a clown of himself because he was doing what other people wanted of him and how somebody else put him in a box rather than the other way around. It's like, no, actually, this is who I am. It's not that. That was your impression of me, but this is who I really am, right?
Yeah, I can relate to that a ton because a bit of a side more conversation, but like home offices, for example, like during COVID, I made my own. I didn't want it to go viral or like I didn't want it to do well. I was like, I'm just going to document this process because I'm just interested in organizing spaces. And now it's definitely something I've grown to love and actually is part of my content. But there was a period there where I was like, oh my goodness, like, am I the desk setup guy? Like, I didn't want to be the desk setup guy. Like, I'm a filmmaker, content creator. Like, I do other stuff. But I think that there's definitely something to be said about finding that balance in between what works, but also not, putting something out for the sake for someone else.
Right.
You have to do it for yourself.
Yeah. And then I think, again, some of the stuff you just don't know until you've done stuff, right?
You have to try it.
You have to try stuff and then you'll get the experience. And then you could reflect back and see, like, what do I want to change moving forward, right? I think I was the same way, right? Some of my early videos blew up because of the desk setup space. And I started trying a bunch of different things, taking half steps away from what I originally blew up from, just to see if I could bring the audience, just to see if somebody else might follow me for some of these other things I'm interested in. And what I had found is after doing so many videos, I realized the thing that I actually enjoy, which is process and sharing the process. So whatever it is I was doing, whether it's designing a keyboard, designing a keycap set, building out my office, designing this table, it all has a process. And I think that things that people enjoy and the thing that I also enjoy making is sharing that process with folks. So the subject matter could change, but how I present it and my angle on it is the same. And that's what I found, at least in my current season of my life and my creativity, especially in the world of being a content creator. That's where I kind of find myself. And it's like, I see how all of these things connect, and here's how I'm going to present myself, at least for now, right? Yeah, so these cover the screws, because for me, I like not seeing screws when I'm...
Same. And they're like kind of, they give it that nice non-slip.
Yeah, so these are just push-in feet. They're made of silicone, so you just push them there. That's how you cover the screws, and then you just pop them off when you need to access them.
Nice. That's like functional and also good for the design.
Yeah.
I like it. So we just finished the keyboard. Oh no, the autofocus might not track, but it's looking nice, y'all. If you're listening, then maybe you can check out the video later. But of course, we got to do a quick sound test. Oh, dude. It's very satisfying. Oh, it sounds so good. I've never actually owned my own mechanical keyboard, so
Now you do. Now you have something to tinker with, because hopefully, or maybe not hopefully, this is the beginning of a journey. I don't know if you want to go down
no,
the rabbit
actually,
hole.
it was. I think I might tinker with trying out new keys. And now, like, if I ever have like a different desk setup and I want a different aesthetic, it's nice because it's like all modular. So I could change out the keycaps, I can
Right.
change out the frame or whatever. I could keep all the internals. That's just a really cool process for me because I loved, like, you know, sometimes setups get boring colorway wise, but also it's like the functionality as well. I think I'm gonna understand more of what I like and what I don't like as I start to use the keyboard.
Right.
Over a couple weeks, couple months, I'll be like, no, actually, I want something else.
That's what we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's like you have to experience different things to know what you like and you
Yeah.
don't like, and then you'll finally find the preference that works for you at that moment.
It's kind of poetic how we did the keyboard build with what the topic of the podcast was. It was a very good tie-in. As an outro, can you tell us a little bit about this keyboard? A big reason why I even came to LA to collab with Matthew was to kind of talk about his new keyboard. He's been working really hard on getting this to launch. And so if you are in the market for a nice keyboard that would last you a long time and it's oddly satisfying, you type, and then you'll just be hooked on it. Because I'm like ready to plug my keyboard in and just start using it and start working. But yeah, give us a little rundown on where people can find this keyboard, how launch is going, and how what's next for Matthew and Encina.
Yeah. So this is the Encore keyboard. It's going to go on sale first on June 12th. That'll be the first drop, and we're going to do a second drop on July 12th, 2024. So they're going to be a month apart. They're going to be sold in different batches in stock. And if you can find all the information on my website at modmusings.com. And once the sales pages are live, it will be a link there. But you can find all the information there, get all the technical specs, and then I'll also be posting a full video on my YouTube channel documenting the process of building this, designing this, manufacturing this, and then kind of taking it to where we are today. So you can be on the lookout for that. And yeah, I'm just really excited to get something that I've been obsessing over on a screen, excessively just working out the details behind closed doors and getting this out there to folks.
That's awesome. What's next for you in terms of like, I know you just told us multiple times that you're typically already only thinking 1 week out.
Yeah.
But in terms of like Mod Musings, for example, is that how you pronounce it? Mod Musings.
Yeah.
What's kind of the plan? Is that going to be like where we can expect to see more accessories from Mod Musings in this world, like tech and niche, or what's kind of brewing in the back end?
Yeah, so for me, I've been shaping what Mod Musings is as an identity. At first, it was just a blog of mine to toss a bunch of the things I'm working on or building, and eventually it became its own brand. And now I view it as a design studio. And so I want to make more products. And I'm already thinking, I know I said I didn't really have any goals, but I've already designed a set of accessories that are probably something I'm going to work on in the second half of the year. So I have a few other keyboard things that are in the queue that are almost ready to announce. And then after that, I have some products that I've developed also in a similar space within the desk accessory space. So I'm just kind of rolling, like taking the things that I've learned from all of the things I've been working on for the past year or two and rolling those into new things, right? Trying different expressions of my creativity and hopefully still connecting with folks that are interested into the same things that I am.
Definitely. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. For anyone listening or watching, we'll link all the relevant things in the description or the show notes, like the keyboard, Matthew's channels to check him out. We honestly only scratched the surface, in my opinion, of all of the experience that Matthew has had over the years. So his blog and his website talks a lot more about it in depth. So definitely go check those out. Thank you again.
Yeah,
Matthew,
dude, thanks for having me. And congratulations, you have a beautiful keyboard built in front of you.
Awesome. See you guys in the next episode.
All right.